So apart from the common rituals that Ismaili Muslims have with other Muslim communities, which are, I mean, in terms of rituals and festivals that they've got, there are specific forms of prayers, of devotional practices that are usually practiced by Ismailis alone. And this is also a result of several centuries of historical evolution of the interaction of the Ismaili community with other Muslim communities, and also as part of or in response to the social, economic, cultural, political circumstances under which they've operated, and also as a result of the intellectual developments within the community. So it's a very dynamic situation. So I'll give you specific examples. Among the practices that Ismailis share with other Muslims is, of course, the celebrations of the two Eids of the Muslims, which is the Eid al-Adha, the Feast of Sacrifice, which is part of the Hajj celebrations. And the other one is the Eid al-Fitr, which is the celebration or the commemoration of the end of the month of fasting, of the month of Ramadan. So on both of these occasions, Ismailis join in congregational public prayers like other Muslims, but of course they gather in their own specific congregational spaces, which are called Jama'at Khanas. Now, the Jama'at Khanas are private spaces of congregation and worship for Ismailis, and they're not public spaces as such. So they have their own prayers, and the prayers are, of course, pretty much overlapping with the same kind of devotional texts that you find in other Muslim practices of prayer, of the Salat. They begin with verses of the Quran, and the entire thing is in Arabic. Of course, they've got their own specific prayers depending on the country in which they live. It might be English, it might be French, it might be Farsi, it might be Arabic, which is coming at the end of the prayers, which is in Arabic. Now, the difference between Ismailis and other communities is that apart from the common things which are public, which are shared between Ismailis and other Muslims, whether they are Sunnis or Shias, for example, the commemoration of the Prophet's nocturnal ascent, which is called the Mi'raj, and also the birthday of the Prophet, or the birthday of Imam Ali, which is celebrated among Muslims, or the day that Imam Ali was, according to Shi'i beliefs, appointed as the successor of the Prophet by the Prophet to succeed him in matters of spiritual and material guidance for the community. Apart from these, there are specific practices which, as I said, are a product of the several centuries of the historical interactions of Ismailis with the communities around. That includes the practices which are pretty much resembling the kind of practices that you find in certain Sufi communities. And that comes from the background of the interaction of Ismailis in Iran after the collapse of the Nizari state in the 13th century, when Ismailis had to go underground, so to speak, and had to live for a couple of centuries in concealment. And in order to survive, Ismailis had developed very close relationship with Sufi communities, with various Sufi communities, including with the Isna Ashari 12er Ni'matullahi order, Sufi order in Iran, and this interaction lasted for several centuries until the migration of the first Aga Khan from Iran to India. Now, those several centuries of practices, of interactions, of close interaction between Ismailis and the 12er Ni'matullahi Sufi order have led to certain practices, and these include the practice of the zikr, which is rising very early in the morning for special invocations of the names of God, which is preceding the normal daily prayers. And of course, there are specific rituals which are inherited from what you see in Sufi communities. And of course, it's very difficult to really tell apart what is specifically an Ismaili practice or a Sufi practice. But there is one thing which is very peculiar to Ismailis, and in a very special way. And this is very prominent today in the Ismaili community around the globe, and that is the tradition of voluntary service. Of course, you find voluntary service in all Muslim communities, the practice of giving your time, giving your knowledge, giving your material resources in the service of the community, but having that done in an organized, in a structured way is very much unique to Nizari Ismailis today. And this also became an established, organized way of doing service in the community, particularly during the time of Ahmad III, Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah, the 48th Ismaili Imam, when the Ismaili Volunteer Corps became an organized body. And now that Volunteer Corps offers services to the community from the lowest level to the highest level in terms of community practice, in terms of civil service, in terms of interacting with other communities, in terms of doing the minor things to the major things that happen in the community. So that voluntary service, that tradition of giving your time, giving your knowledge, giving your material resources, giving your services in literally every aspect of the community is one of the most unique qualities that you find in the Nizari Ismaili community today.